Good evening, Nebraska, and welcome to the Tax Relief Telephone Town Hall presented by the Platt Institute. My name's Adam Weinberg, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's discussion. Now, the Platt Institute is a nonpartisan, nonprofit foundation based here in Nebraska that uses economic research to promote policies that remove barriers to growth and opportunity in our state. You can learn more about us online at plattinstitute.org. That's Platt, like the river, institute.org. Now, as I speak, we are reaching out to Nebraska taxpayers across our state and inviting them to join this town hall as you have. If you'd like to participate in tonight's town hall by asking a question, all you have to do is press the star button at any time. That's star to get in line to ask your question. In the next several weeks, in fact, as soon as late next week, the Nebraska Legislature is expected to begin debate on a package of property and income tax reforms known as Legislative Bill 461, or LB461. This is the first time a tax relief package like this has reached the entire legislature for debate in many years, and time is short for Nebraskans to contact their senators on this issue. That's why tonight I have three experts joining me who have worked tirelessly to deliver tax relief for hardworking Nebraskans, and they can fill you in on the latest details. At least one of our guests I'm sure you're familiar with. The governor of the great state of Nebraska has joined us on tonight's town hall to discuss LB 461. Governor Pete Ricketts, thank you for joining us tonight at the Tax Relief Telephone Town Hall.
Well, thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate all the great work the Platt Institute does, and thanks for having me on the phone call tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Also joining us tonight is the CEO of the Platt Institute, Jim Vocal. Thank you for being here, Jim.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you to everyone listening here tonight.
Now, Jim is a former elected official himself, served on the Omaha City Council, where he dealt with tax issues for 8 years. And last but certainly not least, we have Jared Walczak joining us from the Tax Foundation in Washington, D.C. The Tax Foundation is the nation's leading independent tax research organization. It studies tax policies in all 50 states. And Jared in particular has spent a lot of time trying to help improve our tax system here in Nebraska. He's the author of the Tax Foundation Report, a 21st Century Tax Code for Nebraska. Jared, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Adam. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Well, Governor, you are the guest of honor. Would you care to start by giving us the overview of LB 461, how it impacts property and income tax, and why there's a need to have a tax reform plan that affects both major tax types?
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate it. And again, thank you everybody who's on the phone call. The LB 461, is also known as the Nebraska Taxpayer Reform Act, is really the most comprehensive tax reform package that have come out of the Department of Revenue in a long, long time. And it consists of two broad parts. One is on property tax relief, and the other is on income tax relief. And it's important that we have both of those pieces in this bill, because we're almost certainly going to face a filibuster from people who want to just keep spending taxpayer money. And that means we're going to have to get to 33 votes out of 49 senators to be able to overcome that filibuster. By putting together both property tax and income tax relief together in the same package, we have the ability to build that coalition of both urban and rural senators to be able to do that. And in fact, I don't think we can get either one of these tax packages without doing that, so we have to have both to get either one. Now, I'll start with the property tax component. The property tax component is one that I worked on with Senator Lydia and also with a lot of input from Senator Steve Erdman. And what we're doing is fundamentally changing the way we value ag land from the market sales assessment we've done in the past to an income potential assessment. And I won't get into all the details of how we calculate that unless somebody wants to ask about it on the phone call, but just broadly speaking, this will be more fair to our farmers and ranchers because it's going to tie that ag land valuation more closely to what you can actually make off the land. Now, what we've seen over the last 10 years, going back to 2007, is ag land valuations across the state have gone up 252%. That is something that has led to higher property taxes, especially among our farmers and ranchers. So what we're looking to do is change it so we're going to this income potential that they use in other states so that we control that. In fact, if the Agricultural Valuation Fairness Act had been in place in 2007, we would have seen, instead of a 252% increase, we would have seen a 36.5% increase. And that would have helped us control that spending at the local level. Now, what we're doing, again, is pairing this with income potential that will be based upon local soil types and what kind of land it is, whether it's grassland, irrigated, dry land, and so forth. Not only is this going to be something that's more fair to our farmers and ranchers, but it's also more standard across ag states. South Dakota, North Dakota, Kansas, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Ohio all use this methodology and have for years to help control ag land valuations. And in fact, if you talk to our farmers and ranchers, they'll tell you they're paying 2 to 3 times the property taxes per acre in Nebraska versus their counterparts in those other states like Kansas and Iowa and South Dakota. So this is a major structural relief, major long-term structural relief. Now, if this bill had been in place at the beginning of January of this year, we would have seen about $12 billion of ag land valuation come off the rolls, and it would have reduced then correspondingly about 12% off of ag land valuations across the state on average. If levies had stayed the same, it would have saved taxpayers about $147 million. So you can see it will dramatically change how we do those ag land valuations. And that's set to take place starting in January of 2019, or 2018 rather. Now, the income tax part is also very comprehensive. It includes both individual and corporate income tax as well as collapsing the brackets. So the first thing that will happen as part of the income tax relief is actually collapsing our bottom 2 brackets into one bracket. So we'll have 3 tax brackets instead of 4, which will make our system much more simple. We're also going to be, and that will take place in January 2019, and that will also come along with an earned income tax credit that will also go up, so that we're making sure that all those low-income Nebraska families are benefiting. We're also putting additional tax credits in there as well. We're also going to be starting to take that top tax bracket down for individual income tax rates in 2020. We're going to start with the 6.84% and take it down 0.1% a year until we get to 5.99%. So it'll take about 8 years. Now, we're only going to do that if our revenues are growing at 3.5% or more, which means we've got a trigger to be able to help manage our budget. So if, for example, we're in a recession and revenues are not growing that quickly, we won't be taking that tax rate down, so that we'll be able to manage our budget. Some states have gotten in trouble because they cut tax rates but didn't control spending. We're doing it the other way around, where we've got that trigger in place to manage the individual income tax. Now, we also have a piece for corporate income tax. We're going to be taking that rate down from 7.81% to 7.59%, again, doing that in January 2019, and we're going to be offsetting that impact, that fiscal impact, with removing suspending a couple of tax credits, the new markets tax credit, the new the historical tax credit, Nebraska historical tax credit. Actually, broader-based tax relief is better tax policy than tax incentives, and so that's all good along those lines. So that's what this overall package looks like. Now, we're going to continue to take that corporate income tax rate down, again, starting in 2020, 0.2% at a time, but only, again, with a trigger. This time the trigger is set at 4%. So, as you can see, this is really a comprehensive tax package. A couple of things that are important to note. We are actually right now controlling spending in our budget. I proposed a budget that would allow us to grow at 1.7%. This tax package has no impact on the next biennial budget, because the way we structured it, there's no budget impact. Again, for example, with the individual income tax, it kicks in 2020 and so forth. There will be, because of what we're doing for ag land valuations, we will have to put more money into the TIOSA school aid formula, about $34 million. But again, that's not going to impact us until the biennium after this next one coming up. So that won't hit until the 1920 fiscal year, when we, again, presumably our revenues are recovering, and we'll be able to have 2 years to be able to budget for that. So again, no budget impact with that TIOSA school aid formula. So if anybody asks, how can you cut the budget when you're cutting, when you cut taxes when you're cutting the budget, this is how. We're structuring in a way so that there's no tax impact while we're trying to cut the budget right now. Again, it's also important to note that this has got both property and income tax relief to build that coalition. And actually, it's also important to note that the people, especially in this first year, who are going to benefit are going to be middle-income folks. Because of collapsing that tax bracket, which everybody pays at, and the earned income tax bracket and some of the other tax credits we're putting in there, on a percentage basis, the people who are going to benefit the most are going to be those middle-income wage earners. It's also important to note that our highest income tax bracket starts at $29,831 of taxable income, which is middle class.
Not rich by any means.
Not at all. And for couples, it's $59,661, which is more than half of them. So this is a middle class tax package. It also is important to note that small business pays, 90% of small businesses pay at that 90% or at that individual tax credit or individual income tax bracket. And small business makes up 99% of the businesses in our state. It's about half the people in our state, and small business creates 2/3 of the net new jobs in our country. So by allowing small business to have more of their own money, they can reinvest in creating more jobs here in Nebraska, which is, again, how we grow our state. So I've been talking a long time. I try not to do that, but it is a pretty big tax package that we have here. And, again, this is the most substantial that we've had come out of the Revenue Committee in a long, long time.
Well, thank you so much for that great overview and introduction, Governor. And I would like to remind you there are a lot of items to discuss tonight. If you'd like to be part of the discussion with Governor Pete Ricketts or our other guests this evening, all you have to do is press the star button at any time, and you'll be able to get into the line to ask your question. I'm going to turn to Jim Vokel now, the CEO of the Platt Institute. The Governor was speaking about building that coalition of taxpayers across the state to unite them together to support the Nebraska Taxpayer Reform Act, LB461. You've been watching, Jim, the Revenue Committee for a number of years now. Historically, that group of urban and rural senators, they have been divided. They haven't been able to come to agreement on how to reform the tax system. How is it that this legislation, LB461, finally got out of the Revenue Committee where we're about to have a debate about it on the floor?
That's a great question, Adam. For the first time in a decade, the majority of the senators on the Revenue Committee are actually reform-minded senators that want to make our state more competitive and give back to the taxpayers instead of protecting the special interest lobbyists who want to spend your money. It's really an amazing opportunity under LB 461, and if you look at that legislation as the governor outlined, it has the four pieces that taxpayers have been asking for, and the Revenue Committee listened. First, farmers and ranchers have been asking for our state to assess their land based on use value. That component is in this bill. Second, small businesses, retirees, professionals have been asking for relief from Nebraska's high income taxes for the last couple of decades, and they've largely been ignored. This bill reduces those income tax rates. Third, advocates for low-income families, as the governor has said, have repeatedly proposed to expand Nebraska's earned income tax credit. That important provision's in this package. And finally, major companies have been trying to tell us that they wouldn't be asking for so many incentives if we finally did something about our high corporate tax rates. And why it's so important that we advance this, why it was advanced out of Revenue Committee and the senators support it and taxpayers should be engaged, is that since 1992, Nebraska has lost over $3 billion in adjusted gross income to other states with more competitive tax environments. And the research clearly shows that states with lower income tax rates experience higher growth and less out-migration. It's so important, Adam, that we act now.
Thanks for that insight, Jim. And folks, if you'd like to ask a question during this program, all you have to do is press the star button on your phone at any time. We'll get you in line to ask a question. I want to go to an outside expert, folks, somebody not from Nebraska who's studied our state a lot. Jared Walczak at the Tax Foundation, you're on the line. Jared, you've researched Nebraska's tax system extensively. Jim mentioned some of the things that we're giving up right now under our current tax burden. Can you expand on that? As someone who deals with tax policy in all 50 states, and especially the states we're competing with for economic opportunities, why is it important that Nebraska implements tax reforms?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, Nebraska's tax code is 50 years old this year, 1967. And, a lot of things can change in 50 years. And sometimes states can fall behind simply by standing still because states are competing not just with their regional competitors but national competitors, and they're competing across the world. I think Nebraskans want jobs and growth in their state. They want a state that has a competitive tax code. But here's the thing. Since 2008, 18 states have cut their individual income taxes. 15 states have cut their corporate income taxes. A number of states have done comprehensive reform. And this isn't just about rates. This is about having a tax code that isn't picking winners and losers. Because most codes, including Nebraska's, when they're created, you create certain incentives for what you want to favor in your state. You especially build your corporate code around those industries that you think are your future. And what we often find, this is kind of obvious, but what you thought your future was in 1967 might not be what you think your future is in 2017. It is much better to have that neutral tax code that doesn't pick winners and losers, that has a broader base and lower rates, that provides predictability and stability, that is competitive with your neighbors. Of course, you have a number of neighbors. You have South Dakota and Wyoming that forego individual income taxes altogether. You have states like Colorado and Kansas, Missouri that have lower individual and corporate income tax rates. Only Iowa's higher, and there's some unique unique aspects about that, where they have federal deductibility, which reduces the effective rate somewhat. So you have in Nebraska a tax code that has stood still while you have often more competitive alternatives in the region. Now, taxes are not the only thing that matters for your economic growth, for your business environment, for where people choose to live, but they are something that policymakers can actually affect. You can't change everything that people might not like, but you can change a tax code, and you can keep up. So when you look at a state that has perhaps a bit of an outdated tax code, there's a real opportunity here to simplify, to streamline, to have a more transparent, simpler, neutral tax code that can grow the state's economy and help all Nebraskans.
You know, it's a great reminder that you made, not only the competitive environment, Jared, but the fact that actually today is the 50th anniversary of the creation of the income tax in Nebraska.
Is it actually today?
It is actually today. April 12th was the day that it was signed into law, and people have been promising tax relief for 50 years since.
And you know why we have, why they implemented the income and sales tax, right?
Why don't you tell folks at home?
Well, that was implemented to get property tax relief. And this really goes at that logic, because you can't raise taxes to cut taxes. You have to control spending. That's the only way to have sustainable tax relief. By the way, this is Governor Pete Ricketts. For those of you who've just joined, we're on this telephone town hall at the Platt Institute. And, again, this is the 50th anniversary of signing into law the income and sales tax, and it was to get property tax relief. And the only way to get sustainable tax relief is by controlling spending. You can't raise taxes to cut taxes. It just doesn't work.
Well, with that, we have the first question of the evening for tonight's Tax Relief Telephone Town Hall. I'd like to bring live onto our program now. I believe we have Catherine in Fremont. Catherine, you're live with Governor Pete Ricketts on the Tax Relief Town Hall.
Well, don't leave Jim out. He's here too, and Jared.
and many others. Hello, Catherine.
Okay, I have talked to you previously about this, but the tax package you have. But what is the realistic possibility of passed?
Well, Catherine, what I would suggest, if you're calling for Fremont, please reach out to your Senator Walz, and talk to her about this bill, because we are going to need, it's going to be very difficult. There's no doubt about it. We're going to have to get 33 votes. That means that we're going to have to work very hard to get that. And that means senators like Senator Walz, who are in a district that's got ag land, should be interested in this. And frankly, again, when you're looking at the income tax benefits here as well for middle-income families, she should want that for the folks in Fremont. So this is an important bill. We are going to need folks like you to get engaged, talk to their state senator, ask them for that tax relief, because senators are going to get pressure from the lobbyists. We've had columnists in the Journal-Star paper here in Lincoln already comment that, oh my gosh, this could mean that we're actually shrinking government. We're actually, really going to be controlling spending in government, which is what we ought to be doing. So we do need help from people like you to reach out to your state senator, talk to them, let them know that we need this tax relief, that we're too high a tax state. We've got to be more competitive, especially if we want to grow our state, create more jobs, keep our young people here, and attract people from around the country to move here.
I think you need to remind some of those people that farmland is often the retirement of farmers. We're paying $100 on every $10,000 worth of land we have every year. Now, city people don't do that on their IRAs.
Right. And, just looking at this bill, Catherine, if right now we're looking at, for the Department of Revenue, we're looking at ag land valuations this year in Dodge County probably staying about flat. If this bill had been in place at the beginning of January, excuse me, the valuations would go down 12%. So you can see this is substantial tax relief for our ag land.
Well, I know you've worked hard on this, and I will certainly contact Walz again. I hadn't thought about the decrease in or the benefit to lower income families, but I will certainly mention that.
All right, great. Thank you, Catherine.
Catherine, thank you so much for your call. And yes, Dodge County taxpayers, definitely we need every one of you that we can get to be able to fight for this tax reform. And what I'd like to let people know in Dodge County and every county all across the state of Nebraska is that you can contact your state senator. If you don't know who your state senator is and you'd like more information on it, of course, you can always go to the Nebraska Legislature website. But if you go to the Platt Institute website, we have a link that will help you look up and find out who your senator is and get in touch with them. It's at plattinstitute.org/senators. That's platinstitute.org/senators, and that will help you look up, find your senator, get their contact information. But don't grab your pitchforks just yet, because I'm going to give you a super secret way that you can get in touch very effectively with your member of the Nebraska Legislature tonight on our call and take immediate action to support LB461. So stay on the line, stay tuned, and we will show you how tonight you can give information about LB461 and show your support to your member of the Nebraska Legislature. And remember, if you'd like to call in tonight and be part of the program, all you have to do is press the star key to get to talk with one of our very nice call screeners, and they will get you in line. I'd like to now move on to another question from Barbara in Cortland. Barbara, welcome to the program. You're on the Tax Relief Town Hall.
Thank you for taking my call.
We're pleased to have you.
I'd like to know if there's anything in the bill that addresses how our schools are funded. The property tax for schools is a real problem.
Yeah, there absolutely is, Barbara. So there's a couple of things in it. One, by addressing ag land valuations, it does mean that we, as the state, will have to put in more money into that TIOSA school aid formula. The first year, we're projecting that to be about $34 million. And by 2027, we expect that going up to about $45 million. Now, what that will result in is about 40 more rural school districts becoming equalized. So we'll go from about 71 school districts getting equalization money today to about 111. That's what we project will happen. And, of course, that's important because about 60 to 75% of your property tax bill, when you look at your property tax statement, is actually made up of your school funding. Now, I also want to point out with this bill is it's not exclusive to other ideas on things we can do with regard to property tax relief. So, for example, reforming that school aid formula is another thing we can tackle. We won't be able to do it this year because of the way the legislature is structured, but it's certainly something I know that Senator Mike Groney, who is the chair of the Education Committee, is interested in doing, and we'll be able to start tackling that problem as soon as the session's over and get ready for next legislative year. There's other things we can do with regard to like CIR reform, further expense controls and so forth that can also be helpful to getting that property tax relief by controlling spending.
Until you do that, farmers are not going to see the relief that you say they're going to see, because our school systems have become a taxing entity of their own, and it's wrong.
Barbara, I agree with you. You may recall last year I worked with Senator Sullivan, who was chair of the Education Committee last year, to introduce LB461, which had a number of expense control, kind of common sense expense control kind of things for schools. So, for example, one of them was that you can't put more than 5% of your budget into a reserve fund in any given year, because one of the things that schools have been doing is they go to, say, get a bond issue passed to build an addition, and it would fail a couple times in a row, and then they just start raising their regular rates, put it into that reserve fund, and pay it out of their cash. So that's a way that we can kind of control the expenses. Another thing that schools had was this qualified undertaking fund that they can go 5.2 cents over their levy lid. It was originally intended just for health and safety issues. Some school districts have been using it for new construction. We took that 5.2 cents down to 3 cents in LB461 last year. And then we also clarified it was only to be used for those health and safety issues, not new construction. Unfortunately, that was that was one of the two things that actually got left in the bill. Every other expense provision got taken out because the special interest said that they were too draconian and they couldn't live with them. So we certainly got more work to do with regard to that. But one of the important things in this, this tax reform package, LB461, is that there's a cap on how fast those ag land valuations can go up. They can only go up 3.5% a year. So should we ever see another time where ag land valuations are going up as fast as they have over the last decade, that would be capped, and that's how, again, we would avoid these big run-ups in valuation. Of course, there's no cap or there's no limit on how fast those valuations can go down.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much for your call. We really appreciate you participating on the Tax Relief Town Hall. Governor, I'd like to follow up from a point that one of our previous callers was making, is that people's expectations in this are always kind of limited by their past experiences. People, quite frankly, if you don't mind me saying so, are jaded on the tax reform issue because for so many years they've been told over and over again that some new bill in the legislature is going to help them with their tax issues, and they've kind of just thrown in the towel at that idea. They will believe it when they see it. And so what would you say to someone listening today about why LB461 is different than what they've seen in the past? Why is it worth contacting their Nebraska State Senator about?
Well, this is, as I said earlier, the most comprehensive tax package that has come out of the Revenue Committee. And Jim, I think you did the analysis, so it's back to the 1980s,
1980s, correct.
Yeah, so this is the most significant package that's come out of the Revenue Committee since the 1980s. It is comprehensive, having both property tax relief and income tax relief. Over the course of the next decade, it literally is hundreds of millions of dollars that Nebraska taxpayers will be able to save because we're not taking it from them in the first place. And again, what we have to do on our part as the state government, we have to constrain our spending. That's what we've been doing. So, for example, before I became governor, we were growing the budget at 6.5% a year. It's not sustainable. Working with the legislature 2 years ago, we cut that nearly in half to 3.6% growth. And my budget proposal that I gave to the legislature in January was to cut that in half again to 1.7% growth. And that's what we have to do to manage our budget. Our revenues are not coming at forecast. We got to tighten our belts, just like every Nebraska family does when they see their income go down. And what that does is also allow us to be able to set ourselves up for this tax relief by continuing to control spending, allowing our revenues to continue to grow as we bring new businesses in, as we grow existing businesses, as people move here. That's how we grow that state revenue, by growth, and we use that to be able to start taking these tax rates down a little bit at a time so we can manage it within the budget so we don't get in budgetary problems, but make that long-term commitment to tax relief that people will see on their, on their income tax statements when they're not paying as much. And again, this first year with what we're doing with the earned income tax credit and collapsing the brackets, people in the middle income will see the biggest benefit on a percentage basis of anybody because of the way we're structuring this.
Well, if you would like to contact your senator about LB461, the bill that the governor is discussing tonight in our tax relief town hall, all you have to do, hang on the line, and I'm going to tell you how you can do it in a very special, very effective way on tonight's call, right straight to the Nebraska Legislature. But if you'd like to later maybe go on the internet, send them an email, talk to them, you can also go to the Platt Institute website at platinstitute.org/senators, and that will show you directly at the website for the legislature who your senator is and how you can get in touch with them. That's platinstitute.org/senators, and we've got a lot of great calls yet to get to. If you'd like to call in and talk with the governor, Jim Voelkel, Jared Walczak, all you have to do is press the star button at any time. But Jim, so tell me, we talked a little bit about how LB461 is a different approach, that it is comprehensive, that it affects taxpayers and improves the tax burden for taxpayers across our state in urban and rural communities. Can you talk a little bit about the specifics of the income tax, though? Because some states have gotten into trouble, as the governor has mentioned, doing things the wrong way. What is it about LB461 that does things differently? One senator who did not support LB461 in committee, I heard and saw in the newspaper, he said that the bill was all about starving government. I'm not making this up. It's quoted. You can look. He said that that's what the bill is about. How do you respond to something like that?
Well, I strongly disagree because under the 461 and the income tax provisions that the governor has talked about, we will actually see over $2 billion added to the state's general fund budget for future priorities before we even see tax cuts. And so we are actually growing the state's budget, not starving it, and allowing for other priorities or expenditures, and then the tax cuts come in after that trigger hits. And I'll talk about triggers, but you mentioned the states that are doing tax reform the wrong way, and we've had the luxury of watching those states, such as Kansas. We've also had the luxury of watching those states that have done it the right way and learn from them and structure a tax plan the right way. That's what LB461 does. For every state that's done it the wrong way, there are at least two states that have done it the right way, such as North Carolina, Indiana, and LB461 uses good tax reform from those states and avoids the mistakes of others. I mentioned triggers earlier. Triggers are a good tax reform provision that other states have used. There are tax triggers, which are a series of tax reductions that are implemented over time only when pre-established revenue targets hit, are increasingly popular across the country for phasing in tax reform measures subject to revenue availability. So those folks across Nebraska or those senators that are concerned about future priorities or an economic downturn or volatility, the use of triggers eliminates that concern, because we're not going to cut the tax rate under 461 unless we see either 3.5% or 4% growth, depending on individual versus corporate. And I know Jared will talk a little bit more about this triggers, but if I can mention one thing before concluding my comments right now, LB 460 under 461, we're making sure that instead of promoting more spending, as the budget grows, hard-working taxpayers get their share back through tax relief, and at the end of the term of the bill, we're actually going to see $2 billion more, Governor, in the state's budget.
Yeah, and just on that point, a couple of things. You know, when we're talking about what is the overall, if you look at the revenue growth in the state over just about any 20-year period, the long-term growth of our revenues is between 4 and 5%. So when we're talking about triggers at 3.5% and 4%, that's absolutely doable for us to be able to reach those goals. And so that is one of the important features of this. And then, frankly, you know, we ought to be targeting the growth of our spending to be at that 3.5% target, because if you think about an inflation environment that's very low inflation, where, you know, we're managing our budget and managing our expenses, we really shouldn't be increasing expenses much more than that. We should be trying to manage it to that target so that we can control spending and not take more tax dollars from our people than we absolutely have to.
Well said, Governor. And Jared, you have done a lot of research on triggers. Do you want to put in any plugs for what have been the results of tax cuts that are based on triggers in other states in the country?
Well, triggers have become increasingly popular. In fact, 11 states and the District of Columbia have turned to triggers just in the past few years to implement contingent tax rate reductions and other reforms. And the design of these has varied, but the goal is the same. We all recognize that governments need stable and predictable revenue sources. We want to make sure that while tax reform is phasing in, that we are doing it in a responsible way so that we know that that revenue is available, that governments can plan for that, but then individuals can also have that advantage of predictable tax relief. So when we look at states that have done this, they've been diverse, you know, red states, blue states, everything in between. So, yes, we have red states like North Carolina, although we're currently with a Democratic governor. We have blue states like Massachusetts, states like Michigan, West Virginia, New Hampshire, and, of course, not a state, but the District of Columbia is actually just triggered the last phase of a 3-year tax trigger program to reform the tax code in the District of Columbia. So this is something that has been tested, tried and true. The idea here is that every year an evaluation is made of the revenue gains that the state has made, and that if they reach a sufficient threshold, that a portion of that additional revenue goes to tax reductions. Not all of it. The state does retain a portion of that growth, recognizing, of course, you know, accounting for inflation within that calculation in the sense that it's 3.5 or 4%, which should be above inflation, you know, recognizing the need for additional costs with some of these programs, but also saying a portion of that growth is going to be set aside to make the tax code simpler, more pro-growth, put more money back in people's pockets. There's a lot of things that matter in tax trigger design. It's important to get your benchmarks and baselines right. It's important to have a well-designed system. When I look at what is embodied in LB 461, there are targets that are reasonable and responsible. They are set at a rate where you will trigger these probably in many, maybe most years, but where they aren't so low that you don't actually accomplish the purpose, because a functioning trigger will hopefully trigger most years to get that tax relief, but also does pause when need be. If we do go into recession, we certainly hope not, but you know, if our country goes into recession, these tax triggers are designed in such a way to hit the pause button and make sure the state has the revenues it needs before returning to a system of tax reductions. We've seen this work across the country. It's been very successful, very popular. You know, 10 years ago, no one used triggers, and now it's increasingly rare to see a comprehensive tax reform proposal that doesn't include them in some way. This is a responsible design that really does capture some of the best ideas that you see in triggers across the country.
Well, thanks so much for clearing that up, Jared. And we've had some callers who have been very patiently waiting, and so we want to go to the phones now so that you can speak with our guests. Right now, I'd like to go to James in Burwell. James, you're on the Tax Relief Town Hall. Welcome to the program.
Hey, James, how you doing tonight?
Yeah, thank you. This is James. Thank you for taking my call, Governor. And I guess what I was asking is on property taxes, we're in the rural communities. Like you said, there's almost 170 schools that or 170 schools don't get any state aid at all. Us, we have 4% of our budget is state aid. The rest of it we supply ourselves, and it's a little tough when, this year, 20% of our income is going to property taxes. And after you get a 60% cut in your wages, you might say, as farmers and ranchers, it's a little tough to pay 20% into the property tax. And what I was looking at is I see we're struggling as a district just to keep our toilets flushing, and but yeah, I see these bigger schools, Class B and bigger. They're building brand new schools and all over, all along the interstate and then these bigger towns, and they got pork barrel spending, you might say. And so I guess what I look at is, could you, in some way, be able to allow our local boards to be able to cut benefits, be able to control our spending without getting put into the CIR courts, and be able to have control over that, and so we can control our own spending. And then as for the financial aid, I don't see, it really wouldn't affect us that much if you cut it all together, and then you'd be able to put that into the state budget. But and then you'd have a lot more conservative schools instead of the pork barrel spending they have. And that's all of my question. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thanks, James. Appreciate you calling in. And with regard to that, you're talking about the CIR reform, and that's one of the things I mentioned earlier. This property tax package is not exclusive. There are other things that we can continue to do to manage property taxes. That CIR is one of them. And for those of you who are on the phone that are not familiar with what that is, that's the Commission on Industrial Relations. And what James is referring to is if a school board, say, for example, is controlling the salary growth or the benefits of the teachers can say, hey, what you're doing is not comparable, and they can go out and get comparability to other districts and use that to go to the Commission on Industrial Relations, or the CIR, and get the CIR to overrule the school board. And that's one of the things school boards are afraid of doing. Now, I would encourage school boards to go challenge it and see what happens. But many times they're afraid to do it just because they're worried they'll end up in a worse financial position than they would be if they negotiated with the teachers union in their area. And just on that idea of comparability, I'll tell you, coming from the private sector, this is one of the reasons why CEO pay is out of control, because companies often use that comparability to compare CEO pay, and it just keeps driving it up and up and up, not respective of what the market conditions are. So James is bringing up a really good point with regard to what's going on there with regard to the CIR and other things that we're still going to need to do. So this package is a major structural reform on how we value ag land. It is going to significantly impact how we value ag land. In fact, in Garfield County, for example, this year the Department of Revenue is looking at Garfield County ag land probably going up about 1%. Under this plan, if this plan had been in place in January of this year, they'd go down 9%. So this is major structural relief on that ag land valuation, but as James pointed out, there's other things that we can do with regard to this that we take up. We won't be able to take them up this year because we have about 26 legislative days left, and that bill, I believe for CIR reform, did not get prioritized, so it's not going to be discussed this year. But that is an example of one of the other things we can do to continue to help, encourage that fiscal restraint, allow school boards to be able to make the decisions with regard to their individual districts on how they're spending that money. We believe in local control. It's an important thing, and that's one of the things with regard to that Commission on Industrial Relations we can take up in the future.
And I'll just piggyback on that, Governor. We haven't seen a responsible, substantial tax reform plan like this since the 1980s. We can't let the bill not being completely perfect identifying everything that we want across the state to inhibit its ability to get passed. This is substantial. It's properly structured. It's responsible. It may not do everything that we all want on this call, but it's important that you contact your senator because the opportunity may not exist for another 30 years, and I would hate that this opportunity go by.
Yeah, Jim, that's a great point. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. This bill, again, if it had been in place in January of 2017, would have taken $147 million off of the taxpayers on that ag land. $147 million in tax savings, assuming levies had stayed the same. So, obviously those levies are controlled locally, But that is a big, significant impact for our farmers and ranchers.
Sure is.
And, I want to get just the other thing James was talking about. He was saying 20% of his income. I've had a lot of farmers and ranchers telling me that their property tax expense is becoming their largest single input, and they don't have any control over it, unlike their other inputs, which they do. And that is really putting them at a competitive disadvantage compared to their colleagues in other states. So it's really important that we address this issue for our number one industry here in the state.
And I think we have a caller actually on the line who can give you that story, Governor, straight from the source. We have on the line with us DeFries from Miller. Go ahead, DeFries. You're on with the Tax Relief Town Hall.
I've got a comment on taxes on ag land, and in this particular one, it's on pasture land. I presented in written form, in type form, the information to the tax assessor and the tax board that determines this. Each one had their own copy. The taxes exceeded let's back up a little bit. The income minus expenses other than taxes, and then you add the taxes in addition to that as an expense, and the taxes put that into a negative income on that land. As I understand, that's not uncommon. And I also say that the ag land in terms of cropland is not far behind. If we have a major expense like having to replace a well or something for irrigation, you're in serious trouble because the income is not there. I presented, like I said, the information to the tax assessor, and we had information from the tax assessor with the assessor to find information on where we are required to do this by state law, and gave us a bunch. I asked for the information, where do I find it, and gave us a bunch of different numbers and so forth. My wife and I spent several hours in the library looking this up and on the internet and so forth, and we found nothing. At the hearing, my wife was told at any rate that was just a matter of judgment. I mean, it was just an outright lie that the stuff that they were doing was not even in state law at all. And
so, DeFries, what have you gone to your Nebraska State Senator? Have you had any kind of interaction at the state level on the issue? And what have some of the responses you've received been?
Actually did, and I did. The person that took information. This is clear back in September, early October, and I told the person that asked me for information. I didn't remember him responding to the information we sent him. We sent him the same information that the tax board and so forth had. He did respond to it, and I was mistaken when I said he did not. But he didn't really have any solutions or anything. Well, thanks for contacting me and that kind of stuff. But nothing other than that. Nothing.
Well, thank you so much for calling, DeFries. Governor, is that something you've heard a lot as you've talked with people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that farmers and ranchers have shown me their P&L. One of the farmers, Roger from Wayne County, showed me his P&L on several pieces of property, and showed the same thing that DeFries was talking about, that he was not making any money, that he was losing $40 an acre on every acre planted. And that is part of the issue, is when property taxes become such a big part of your overall expenses, when they become the number one expense, if it's 20, 30, or even I've had some producers show me 40% of their top line going to pay property taxes, it makes it very difficult to pay money or to make money on that. And this is our state's number one industry. And so we're putting our farmers and ranchers at a competitive disadvantage. And when you see so much of their top line go into property taxes, it really brings home how we have to address this issue.
So when you're an ag producer and you're looking at your future in Nebraska, what does LB461 offer as far as looking down the road?
Well, again, this is major structural change, right? We're going to what the surrounding states. I mean, again, if you want to know how effective this bill, this income potential assessment will be, just talk to a farmer or a rancher who has land both in Nebraska and Kansas, or Nebraska and Iowa, or Nebraska and South Dakota, and they'll tell you that they are paying 2 to 3 times the property taxes in Nebraska as they're paying in those other states. And so by addressing the issue of ag land valuation, which all those 3 states I just named have gone to this methodology, I think South Dakota was the most recent in 2008, and that has helped them control those ag land valuations, and along with it, the property taxes that go with those valuations. Again, if this bill had been in place in 2007, we would have seen our ag land valuations go up just 36% compared to the 252% they actually did go up. Think about that. 252% over 10 years, that's an average of about 25% a year. That is simply outrageous.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that reply, Governor. Jim Vokel, CEO of the Platt Institute, you mentioned earlier, and as the Governor just got done explaining, for many years, if you've been watching the Revenue Committee, you've seen farmers and ranchers come and talk about this income potential approach that other states have used. You've seen small businesses across the state and professionals talk about income tax reform. You've seen low-income advocates talk about the earned income tax credit. You've seen major companies talk about the corporate income tax. It seems like we finally, with LB461, have a package that does all of these things that people have been coming to the Revenue Committee asking for years. How is it that finally they worked it out on the Revenue Committee where they were able to get a bill together that does so much for so many Nebraskans?
Well, I think we have reform-minded Revenue Committee members led by Chairman Smith, who is a co-sponsor of this package with Senator Brosh, who's also on the Revenue Committee. But I think that instead of listening to lobbyists and those people that don't want to give more money back to small businesses and middle-class families, they want to see more money spent in Nebraska's budget. This Revenue Committee has listened to Nebraskans. I listen to Nebraskans as I travel state. I know the Governor does as well. People are concerned about out-migration, especially with young people, losing good opportunities. I see and I hear people see the impact of Nebraska's high taxes. They see grandparents moving away to lower tax states. They see family members starting a business in other states because, quite frankly, it's just easier to do business given the tax structure. And these are real-life stories, and thankfully the Revenue Committee listened to these Nebraskans, these citizens that are concerned that we've got to do something this session.
Yeah, and if I could just piggyback on that for a moment, just compliment Senator Smith, who's chairman of the Revenue Committee, on really bringing this package together, because he has worked long and hard to be able to get all the components you just talked about, Adam, into one bill. It's really been yeoman work, and really quite an accomplishment to even get this bill out of committee. It's really an accomplishment from that standpoint of the most comprehensive tax bill since the 80s. And he really needs to be complimented. So if you're in Senator Smith's district, please give him a shout-out next time you talk to him.
And if you're in anybody else's district, we're going to talk real soon about how you can get in touch with your Nebraska State Senator to show your support for LB461, the Taxpayer Reform Act. And what I would like to tell you is that if you would like to find out online how to send an email or do anything else, or you don't know who your senator is, just visit the Platt Institute website at platinstitute.org/senators, and it will bring up a great tool that is courtesy of the Nebraska Legislature, giving credit where credit is due. And they will show you, based on your address, who your state senator is. But if you already know who your state senator is, of course you don't need that information, but we're going to show you how you can be in touch tonight through our program with your Nebraska State Senator. Just hang on the line. I want to talk to a few more Nebraskans who are interested in the Tax Relief Town Hall. We now have a call on the line from Richard in Lincoln. Richard, you are with Governor Ricketts, Jim Vokel, and Jared Walczak on the Tax Relief Town Hall. Welcome.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you, and thank you for your efforts. A couple ideas where to cut taxes. Enterprises such as, for example, and this might raise a firestorm, but we have to face this, maybe groups like Nebraska Arts Council, and another group, Nebraska Educational Television.
You're going to get us in trouble naming all these names.
Oh, well, that's the way it is. Yes, I understand that. Oh, do I understand it. And Nebraska Educational Radio. Now, all of these enterprises, in at least some instances, provide a very good service. There are programs on ETV that are absolutely over the top. They're just excellent. But frankly stated, there's a lot of content on Nebraska ETV that's far from educational. It's far more entertainment. And
so, Richard, may I ask, how would you factor this back into your concern about taxes?
Well,
if you don't mind me asking.
Yes, of course. Those groups should not receive state, if they provide a viable service, then they should be able to collect a user fee directly from the user, just like state parks now do.
Well, I think you bring up some interesting points, probably a discussion for another day, but I would say those groups, especially I know from NAT, we work with them in the legislature, do great work raising from many philanthropic and community organizations, and so, it's great to have free speech on a tax relief town hall. Governor, did you?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Richard's right. I mean, when he's talking about, again, the only way you can have sustainable tax relief is by controlling spending.
Yeah.
And one of the things we have seen, for example, farm income in Nebraska has gone from $7.5 billion in 2012 and 2013 down to $4.5 billion in 2015, and when the 2016 numbers are in, it's probably closer to $4 billion. And that's because of declining commodity prices. What that has meant is that our state revenues are below forecast, and we have to tighten our belt, which means we have to make spending decision priorities. And so I think what Richard's getting at is if you're talking about priorities of where you're going to spend money, for example, if you're talking about the Arts Council, you're going to have to make decisions about what are you going to spend state dollars on, that versus other essential services like taking care of needy families, building roads, all those sort of things. And so absolutely, when Richard says we need to be examining our priorities, he's right. We need to take a look at these things. As you point out, they're all fine organizations. They all do fine work. But what is the priority that we're going to be spending our tax dollars on? Because ultimately, we have to control spending in this budget because we don't have the revenues coming in. We've got to make tough decisions.
I think eventually you brought it back there with his concern about spending, and of course we're all going to have different ideas about what needs to be important, and that's why we have a budget process where people decide those kinds of things. So I want to thank you very much for calling in, Richard, and offering your views. We have another call on the line. Forgive me, the name escapes me at the moment, but let's see. We have Larry in Bellevue. Larry, I think you have a great question lined up, and so I'd love to bring you on the Tax Relief Town Hall. Larry, go right ahead.
Yes, Governor, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Larry. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Hey, I guess the question that I just want to make sure this bill is conducive to the agricultural community. Is that not correct?
So the property tax part of this is, targeted at that ag land valuation that we've seen, those tremendous growth in valuations over the last 10 years of 252%. That's right.
And I'm retired military, so I grew up in the metropolitan area and was born and raised here. But I think that we should help those folks. But I look at your comparative analysis, and I think Mr. Vogel said it. He said, we're seeing our parents and our grandparents move to states that don't have any state taxes and can afford to live there because, just as an example, my parents are in their mid-80s, and they pay $4,000 a year out of their $48,000 income to property taxes, and they live in Omaha and have most of their life. So when we compare to those other states that you mentioned, North Carolina, Indiana, Kansas, those states have far larger populations than we do. So I just wonder, how can we help the agricultural community give them some type of better relief than what we do where the more populated areas are? Because it sounds as though they're struggling, especially that earlier farmer, that gentleman that spoke. That farmer seemed to be struggling, that he was giving out quite a bit of his income to cover his property taxes. So,
Larry,
I'm sorry, Larry. Are you still there?
I think we lost Larry, but I think what his question was, thank you for your service, by the way, Larry. I think we really all appreciate your dedication to your country. I think what he was getting at, especially a gentleman from Bellevue, I think, what does this offer for those who are city folk, who they have maybe they're on a fixed income, or maybe they just have a family budget that they have to hold together? What does LB461 offer for them?
Well, first of all, I'd say that in our budget, my budget proposal in general, that we continued our commitment to the Property Tax Credit Relief Fund. So that was, again, remember I talked about how we cut the growth in government from 6.5% to 3.6% 2 years ago? Well, when we did that, we were able to increase the Property Tax Credit Relief Fund by over 45%. And again, that's direct dollar-for-dollar tax relief from the state to all property owners in the state. So, in fact, the majority of that actually does go, to the residential property taxpayers. So, actually, I'd say maybe not, because there's also commercial in there too, but ag land is actually less than 50% of that. So we actually are continuing our commitment in this budget, at least my budget proposal, to those property tax payers in urban areas as well. So that's one thing. Also, for folks that maybe are in the situation that Larry's parents are, there's the Homestead Exemption. So that's a way that, again, this is money the state puts in to offset those taxes for people who qualify based on income to have that Homestead Exemption with regard to their property taxes, so that they're not forced out of their home because of, they're on a fixed income and their property taxes keep going up. So that's another thing that we made the commitment to in my budget, to fully fund that as well. Now, with regard to 461, by tackling those tax brackets and collapsing those, increasing the earned income tax credit, bringing down those individual tax rates, we are impacting everybody who pays income tax in the state to be able to get tax breaks over the next few years. And again, as I said, when we do that, collapse those tax brackets, what you'll see is that primarily benefits those middle income tax payers or earners on a percentage basis. Those are the people who are going to see the greatest benefit out of this package. There's obviously other areas that we can take a look at in the future too. We've looked at, we're one of the few states that tax Social Security benefits. I think we're one of 8 states that does that. That makes us uncompetitive. We're one of a few states that tax military retirement benefits. Again, Larry, thank you for your service. That's one of the areas that we should take a look at. In fact, 2 years ago, I actually left room in my budget for the Revenue Committee, who was then under different leadership, to actually pass some military tax benefit tax relief. They chose not to do it that year. Getting back to, I think, Jim, your point about the leadership has changed, and so we've got different leadership thinking about tax relief now. So there's a lot of things that we have to continue to do to be competitive as a state. But again, I go back to Jim's point, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is the most significant tax package we've had since the 1980s. Let's get this passed. It doesn't mean we have to stop what we're doing. It's not exclusive to other things we can do, but let's get this package passed this year.
And Governor, to piggyback on your point, one of the issues we hear a great deal about are, and especially in Bellevue and Sarpy County, we hear about retirement taxes, retired military benefit. And one thing it may behoove people to know is that the income taxes that they pay on their retirement benefits are the same income taxes that everybody else in the state pays. So when you're having income tax relief through LB461, you're also impacting the tax bills that people are paying on their military retired pay and on their Social Security benefits all across the state, as well as everybody else who's an income taxpayer. But Governor, you've heard stories tonight from folks from across our state. I know you've been traveling our state. In fact, I can't think of a time when I don't see a report about you meeting somewhere, some part of the state, all over the place. I was wondering if you might be able to share with us what you're hearing from folks in Main Street and in communities across the state about the kinds of reforms that LB461 has inside.
Well, when I travel across the state, one of the things that people tell me is we're taxed too much. And it's certainly true. If you look at, for example, the Tax Foundation, they said we're 14th highest when it comes to per capita taxes. When you look at USA Today, they say we're 5th worst when it comes to property taxes. So we have to address our tax issue. Certainly property taxes are the number one thing people talking about and have been talking about as I've traveled the state, especially in our number one industry, agriculture. And that's what this bill does. It tackles that issue with regard to ag land valuations in a very significant way. This is major structural change that will result in significant decreases in ag land valuation. It also tackles the issues of income taxes, both personal income tax, which is one of the things that if you look around at the states surrounding us, the only state that's got a higher income tax rate than us is Iowa. And as you pointed out, 2 states, South Dakota and Wyoming, have no income taxes, or Jared pointed that out. So that's what we have to do to become more competitive. Small businesses saying they want to be able to grow, but we got to get out of their way. This 90% of the small businesses pay on that individual income tax rate, so that's how we can help them grow. And of course, small business creates 2/3 of all the new jobs in our country. If we can give them back more of their money, that'll help them. But the biggest thing about this is middle class tax relief. That income tax package and the earned income tax bracket and collapsing the tax brackets, all of that is going to benefit our middle class taxpayers because our top tax rate starts at $29,831 of taxable income. That's middle class. And so that's what this tax package does. Allows Nebraska families to keep more of their own money, especially those middle class families, put that money back in their own pockets.
Thank you, Governor. Jim, you've traveled around the state quite a bit as well, maybe not quite as much as the governor. I think I see you in the papers a little bit less maybe he doesn't. Maybe some of that's on me. But can you tell me what maybe some of the feedback you're getting statewide when you talk to people about the need for tax reform?
Yeah, I'll echo what Governor Ricketts said. Property taxes generally is the number one concern. I hear concerns of small business owners that are competing with other businesses in other states that can do business at a lower cost because of their income taxes are lower. I hear about families that have their parents retire in a different state because they have lower income taxes on their income, including Social Security income. So I hear a tremendous amount of concern about our taxes, and this substantial tax package, LB461, that's going to be debated next week, is a really good step, a responsible step for alleviating some of their concerns. And when critics say that nobody's talking about the need for these types of tax reforms, they're ignoring these Nebraskans that the governor and I are listening to, who have been talking about the need for them for decades. And let's not let another 3 decades go by before we see a substantial tax package, have the opportunity to get the endorsement and approval by senators. So please be engaged on LB461, and I know Adam's going to talk to you very shortly on how you can contact your senator tonight.
Now, Governor, you've said that you expect LB461 to be filibustered in the legislature, and this is where the rubber meets the road. We need to talk to people about why they need to be in touch with their senator. It seems that as much as taxpayers have been waiting for tax relief and tax reform, this is not a done deal. So what can the listeners do to help put LB461 over the top?
Well, their state senators are looking for their feedback. They want direction from their constituents, and so I encourage everybody on the phone to reach out to your state senator, tell them that you want to support this tax reform package, the 2017 Nebraska Taxpayer Reform Act, LB461. That is a significant tax relief. You want them to support it and expect them to help break that filibuster to be able to get this package to my desk for signature. So that is one of the single biggest things people can do is reach out to their state senator, let them know they support this, because frankly those state senators, they're getting lobbied by the special interest group who want to continue to spend money. These lobbyists who come to the Lincoln, for the Capitol, they're being paid by somebody to come here. And they're being paid to spend your money as taxpayers. So that's who those state senators are hearing from each and every day. And I know you all have day jobs and you're busy in your own lives, but please take the time because your senators are hearing from these lobbyists who are paid to spend your money. They also need to hear from you, the people whose money they're spending, to tell them, knock it off. You got to control spending and you got to cut our taxes.
And I'm going to tell the folks at home right now a very effective way that they can get that message right to the Nebraska Legislature tonight, right on our call from the Tax Relief Town Hall directly to the Nebraska Legislature. You can contact your Nebraska senator and let them know that you support the Nebraska Taxpayer Reform Act, LB461. It's very easy. Here's how you do it. All you have to do is press the 7 key at any time on your phone, and that will take you directly to the Nebraska Legislature so that you can give your senator a peace of mind and let them know that you support LB461. I know I made it sound like a big secret. Really, all you had to do all along was press the 7 key, and it would take you right to the Nebraska Legislature.
So now the legislature's not open right now, Adam, so what's going to happen?
So they will be directed to the voicemail where they'll be able to leave a message with their senators. And so I encourage you to do that because it's a very effective way to get in touch with them. They love to come in the morning and see that they've got a lot of voicemails blinking there from constituents. But here's the other thing you can do if you would like to leave an in-person message. What you should say, what you should mention is that you believe that now is the time for tax reform in Nebraska, for Nebraskans all across our state, and that it's time for taxpayers to stick together, whether they're taxpayers concerned with property tax or whether they're taxpayers concerned about income tax. It's time that we stick together and we support tax reform for all Nebraskans, the Nebraska Taxpayer Reform Act, LB461. That's the message that you'll need to get to your state senator, and you can do it right now by pressing the 7 button on your phone pad at any time, and that'll take you right over there. Now, if you'd like to go talk to them during business hours, if you'd like to send them an email, like I said, we can help you look up where your state senator is if you don't know by going to platinstitute.org/senators. That's platinstitute.org/senators, and that will open up a tool that will let you put in your home address, and it will show you who represents you in the Nebraska Legislature so that you can talk to them. So if you'd like to go speak and send a message to your Nebraska state senator, I encourage you to hit the 7 key right now. There are all kinds of senators who we know are on the fence on this issue, and this would be a key opportunity to get the message out to them. Any other thoughts folks have here about that?
Well, I would say even if your state senator has expressed support for this bill, please reach out and let them know they're doing the right thing anyway. Because, again, they're hearing from the special interests. The lobbyists are talking to them daily about how they have to spend more money. So we need to, the senators that are doing the right thing, reach out and let them know they're doing the right thing so they know they've got your support.
Well, Governor, thank you so much for participating on tonight's program on behalf of myself, Jim Vocal, everyone at the Platt Institute. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Do you have any other thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, again, just Adam, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jared, for being on the call tonight. And thank you, everybody who's on the call tonight. I so much appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to listen to us talk about the tax reform package. We have the best place in the world in Nebraska because of our people. Nebraskans get involved in their communities, in their schools, in their churches, to make them better places. So thank you for staying on this phone call tonight, and please, reach out to your state senator, let them know, be involved, be engaged. We're working very hard to get tax relief here for Nebraska families. We need your help. Thank you very much for being on. God bless you all, and God bless this great state of Nebraska.
Governor, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your leadership on tax reform. Folks, press 7 now and tell them that you support LB461. We've made it very easy for you, and now's the time that we do tax reform in Nebraska and put more money in your pockets. Thank you all.
Yes, debate's starting next week, so now or never, folks. You've been waiting 30, 50 years, some of you, for this. Today's the day. Press 7 and you can talk to your Nebraska State Senator. I want to thank you, Governor. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much, Jared, for joining us from the Tax Foundation, for all of you providing your insights, and for all of you on the phones. It's been our pleasure to host tonight's telephone town hall. I hope each of you will consider joining us again for a future Platt Institute program. If you'd like to stay in touch with us, you can subscribe to our weekly email at www.plattinstitute.org/subscribe. That's plattinstitute.org/subscribe, and you'll hear from us every week about what we're doing to remove barriers to economic growth and opportunity in Nebraska. Thanks, everyone, for your great questions and participation, and once again, thank you to Governor Pete Ricketts for joining us. This is Adam Weinberg signing off for the Platt Institute and wishing you all a very pleasant evening.